Welcome to Let's Talk About Ag BMPs. My name is Yilin Zhuang. I'm the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent in UF IFAS Extension Central District. Today, I invited Dr. Lakesh Sharma to join us to talk about Ag BMPs. Dr. Sharma is an assistant professor in University of Florida Soil and Water Sciences Department. His specialty is soil fertility and sustainable agriculture. Hi, Dr. Sharma. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Your research is focused on the best management practices in agriculture. So would you give us a quick overview? What is an agriculture best management practice?
Sure. So thank you, Yelin, for having me today. I work in best management practices in agriculture side, and I'm an agriculture best BMP coordinator for state of Florida. I work with Dr. Michael Dukes very closely. And my crop focuses on corn, potatoes, and partly industrial hemp. I joined University of Florida as a BMP coordinator and assistant professor of soil fertility in 2019, and it was a transitioning period from my predecessor, Dr. Kelly Morgan, and Dr. Michael Dukes, and Jim Fletcher. It was a big shoes to fill in. And then COVID came, so it gave me some time to read about the literature and the history of a BMP. So typically the agencies in Florida, for example, University of Florida, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, DEP, and local stakeholders, including farmers and commodity association, something like a potato association or corn council or cotton associations. They work together to develop the best management practices to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus load to our local water bodies. There is a standard to be maintained. We call it as TMDLs, total minimum daily load, that for nitrogen and phosphorus that can go into these water streams, water bodies, without damaging or polluting the waters, and to reach that goal of TMDLs, the BMPs were developed. And Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services have developed some manuals in collaboration with the University of Florida, IFAS. And those manuals have the BMPs for almost every crop that is being grown in Florida. There are typical manuals, something like SP 500, I believe, and that has a nutrient management in vegetable crops and row crops. So there are recommendations from University of Florida in those crops, and those recommendations are being followed in the manual by Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And with the new bill, Senate Bill 712, those recommendations are now mandatory to be followed by the growers to be in compliance with the BMP.
Wow. So now, because you mentioned the SB 712, now they are required. So I think some audience may wonder, what is Senator Bill 712? Would you please give a quick overview of SB 712?
Yes, sure. I have. I will share with you my slides that will give a little more insight into that, like the you can call it the language that being used in the bill. So Governor Ron DeSantis signed a new law, Senate Bill SB 712, short abbreviation for Senate Bill, entitled to Clean Water Act. This new law requires a wide range of water quality protection provisions aimed at minimizing the impact of point and non-point sources of nutrient pollution. So this bill has impacted both urban and agriculture nutrient management. And uh, in a nutshell, the BMPs that are being developed in the past now are mandatory for the growers to follow. So specifically, nutrient management records. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, their representatives or their field staff will visit farmers, and they will collect these records on nitrogen, phosphorus, possibly in potassium as well. And they call that a record form as NARF. The growers have historically used to keep the records for all the inputs they use. So these field staff will possibly request that information from growers to fill that form, and that information will go back to FDACs. So and then if the farmer is out of compliance, for example, a farmer is over applying, then what recommended by in the manuals from FDACs, then the FDACs will work with that farmer for a couple of years to be in compliance with the BMPs, nutrient management BMPs, and will help that farmer to be sustainably follow those recommendations.
That's good to know. It's they have a couple of years to be in compliance, and they will help. It's will walk them through the steps how to implement BMPs. That's good to know. And for those audience who, because I know in last probably 2 minutes, you just receive a bunch of information if you're just new into agriculture. So I will put all the additional resources in the notes section. So if you are interested, you can read some additional resources and have a better understanding of agriculture best management practices and Senator Bill 712. Just going back quickly, because you mentioned they are basically a manual, a BMP manual for every crop that is growing in Florida. So I'm just really curious, what kind of crops or what are these manuals? How many manuals do we have in Florida? Do you have an idea?
Yes, I believe the majority of crops are there. All the vegetable crops, the major vegetable crops that are grown in Florida. For example, potatoes, tomatoes, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, all major on the southern side as well, including sugarcane, and the North Florida, corn, cotton, some carrot, and those are the crops that are in the manuals. And there's a manual for the livestock stock as well. I think if I'm not wrong, there are around 8 to 10 manuals that are on Florida Department of Agriculture Consumer Services website, and they are free. Anybody can access that. We as an institution update our handbooks on vegetable production, nutrient management, and row crops almost every other year or alternate year, depending on how much updates we have. And basically the FDACs adopt those changes in their manual as well.
That's great. That's good to know. They update their manuals. So I will put a link up there just you can go download the BMP manuals. That's another question just occurred to me, because as you mentioned, the BMPs were originated to protect Florida's water. Then how about the production? How about yield? the manuals also improve the yield?
That's correct. So uh, the history of BMP goes back to 80s and 90s, late 80s, and then it started, and then in 90s it picked up pretty well. Dr. Brian Bowman was the pioneer of BMP work in Florida, and after that, there are a few BMP coordinators that worked in the same title, and now uh, you know. I'm the new young BMP coordinator. Still drinking from the fire hose, but I'm surviving so far. Yield. You talk about the yield. Yes, there is definitely a huge bump in the yield across all the crops, and that is due to several factors. One is obviously the big factor is the BMP, the best management practices that growers have adopted over the years in terms of using water efficiently on the crops, and then following the high efficient nutrient management program. There is uh, just an example, the potato yield uh, 15, 20 years ago was in the range of 200, 220 on an average. And this year I harvested on from the producer's field, I harvested 370, 380, 100 weight per acre of potatoes. So there is a definitely uh, a, a huge bump in the yield in the production side, and I would definitely give a huge credit to the producers to following the BMPs, um, and to get to this point. There are producers that are following BMP very seriously, and they have seen the benefits over the time. Specifically, the row crop production system, it depends on inputs that impacts the overall budget of that crop for productivity. Any reduction or decrease in nitrogen, phosphorus rates could impact the grower's profit a lot. And from these recent years, the prices of these inputs have increased as well. So
That's excellent. So BMPs are not just environmental friendly, they are also economically feasible.
yes, as I said, uh, they are there to help environment and do our business in the agriculture sector sustainably. So these practices are being developed over the research station and are demonstrated on the growers field. I won't say all these practices, but majority of these practices are being demonstrated to growers on growers field, and we are now doing a lot of on-farm demos in North Florida and on Northeast Florida, and there is a more research on producers field ever before. So this started probably last year or couple of years. It's a trend now. Most of the specialists are doing a lot of research on the farm, and we are very thankful to the growers who are helping them to have their trials on their farm. And that helps to replicate the same results that are being achieved on the research station, and compare with the producers field, and that gives more confidence to researcher as well as their stakeholders like a farmer to adopt these BMPs.
We do appreciate the farmers let us do trials on their farm. Just like Dr. Sharma said, it is very important for us to duplicate the results on a real site from the experiment, like research site. So I have another question, might be a hard question. So if you could only recommend one Ag BMP, what would you recommend?
I would it so every crop is different in Florida, and there is not one method that could be followed in all the crops. So all crops are very different in uptake of these nutrients. For example, I would say if I have to pick one BMP for something like corn, and I would pick to do a multiple applications of nitrogen that could synchronize with the crop uptake behavior, and also look for weather forecast, because most of these growers are doing uh, uh, their nitrogen application with the irrigation water. Uh, uh, so if they are using irrigation water and they applied some nitrogen, there's a heavy rain after that, all that nitrogen has a potential to leach down. So so if they are better sync with the weather forecast and apply their nitrogen accordingly, that will help improve the crop productivity, crop uptake of the nitrogen, and it also will reduce the nitrogen leaching.
Sounds good. So it really depends on the crop, depends on the region. But I like your point. I always check the weather. So I know for BMPs, you can also apply for cost share programs, and within the cost share programs, you can get a weather station. So in that way, you can have a more accurate weather prediction on your farm.
Yes.
So, oh, go ahead.
We have FDAX has a cost share program for the soil moisture sensor that gives a lot of information about the moisture status of the soil that is required for every crop. So growers can go and ask cost share programs for soil moisture sensors and several other BMP tools that are available for the cost share program. We also have a mini grant program for the extension agents that they use for on-farm demo trials. They use some of these tools, for example, soil moisture sensors that Dr. Charles Barrett has lended to several extension agents to use for their research purposes in different crops. So there's a lot of efforts are being in process for the BMP work. And we are very thankful to Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services for their continuous funding, water management districts for their continuous funding, and cost share programs from both agencies. That is a great help in helping growers to adopt these practices.
That's excellent. It's a truly collaboration. It's just not one party. It's everyone works together to enhance Ag BMP implementation. Then I think someone may be wondering, how about, because BMP before SB 712, it was voluntary. So how about the enrollment of BMPs?
So so I joined in 2019 when this bill was almost in place, and before me, what I have learned that most of the growers enrolled in these BMP practices. So, but there was no implementation factor involved, and now with SB 712, the implementation factor is involved because the FDAX can check and verify whether the grower is following the BMP or not. So and there is a possibility that in the past the growers were following partial BMP practices, and now since it's a law, it was expected in the past as well that all the growers will be following the BMP, and perhaps they were following, but now it's a law for them to follow. So that's a change that probably would help in moving in the future side of agriculture. We are not the only one that's are being regulated. There are many other countries and many other states that are considering these regulatory uh, uh, means to control the pollution, environmental pollution. So as I said, we could be a good example for many other places uh, for a successful BMPs. Uh, so I'm looking forward, and I'm seeing a very positive change among growers in following the BMP, and I'm seeing a huge um, uh, positive efforts from IFAS as well in terms of updating the nutrient recommendation across many crops. I'm personally working on cotton, corn, potatoes, and there are several other professors that are working on several other crops and updating nutrient recommendations across the crops in Florida.
Definitely some good news. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. I know who you are watching, for those who are watching this video, so you may have more questions because Ag BMPs can be very complicated because it's just like we have so many crops, each crop is different. So if you have any questions, put in the comment section. We'll definitely have Dr. Sharma come back again to give us more detailed info and dive into probably several of these BMPs. And for today, we will just stop here, and we look forward to chatting with Dr. Sharma again. And thank you for watching this short video. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.